Yari Yari Pamberi. Tell me about it.
I am grateful that I was selected to receive this award from this particular organization. It's very, very dear to me. Although I have to say I would have come anyway. And the reason I was interested was because it was a chance to see people I haven't seen for a long time. Old friends. Old as in old. People of my generation. And I have to tell you, particularly those of you who are 20 and 30, we were fierce. I have always been attracted in my novels to what I call outlaw women. Not because I necessarily approve of their behavior, but I have to tell you that the nature of being a woman in those days and earlier, particularly for black women in any country, was to be an outlaw. You just started out illegal. And you had to struggle with that definition through whatever you did. Nobody wanted you to do any of it. And nobody had any expectations that you would do anything but what you were told. So you're already illegal. It is very pleasant for me, so exciting for me to see women, young women, who say, I am writing, I am painting, I am making a film, I am. And they are not questioning whether about the possibilities and who doesn't want them to do it, etc. They have indeed, I think, taken the best of what we were about in that arrogance, ferocity, clarity, and the stuff we got from one another, taking it to another step, so that I hear women say, less, I want to be. They are saying, now, I am.
That's right.
Bienvenidos. And for my people, Jamangam, Nangara. On behalf of the Organization of Women Writers of Africa, the New York University Institute of African American Affairs, I welcome you to Yari Yari Pamberi, Black Women Writers Dissecting Globalization, an international conference on literature by women of African descent.
Globalization is nothing new for us people of the Caribbean and from Africa. It started a long time ago. It started in the 17th century when the King of Spain granted permission to a commercial company to import people from Africa. From that day, people from Africa, our ancestors, were forced to leave their home, to go to new environment, to settle there, to forget about their gods, about their language, and to try to build a new way of life. So what we see now, everybody is talking about that. I'm going to paraphrase Kwame Nkrumah. You know that he used to say, imperialism, last stage, supreme stage of capitalism. So I want to say that what we see now is a supreme stage of globalization. How long it is going to last, I don't know.
This conference gives me an opportunity to pay tribute to my sisters of the African diaspora by sharing with you my views, my fears, and my hopes about Africa, and also share the reason why I think that another Africa is possible, and struggle so that it can happen. And what are we told more and more by others about our situation in the world as Black people and as Africans? As far as Sub-Saharan Africa is concerned, we have been told that bad governance is the main constraint to develop our continent. Since we were facing in our daily lives injustice and witnessing corruption, we started to hope that by changing our leaders, we would change our destiny. This is why from one country to another, elections have been undertaken and been the main concern of our people. This is why also we are killing each other, claiming good and well-organized election. Unfortunately, it's not working because the process is taking place in a non-democratic process, which is globalization itself.
One of the projects that I have given myself is to travel the world to see how the people are doing, you know? And I encourage that for Americans because you know there are only 14% of Americans have passports. And that's one of the reasons when they see bombs falling on other countries, they don't know what it's falling on. I mean, they can't make the leap. As sad as that is to think about. But we have to go, we have to travel to see the people, and we have to remember that we are our country. You know, forget about being, quote, American big fat A, and acting that way, which is so horrible. Have you ever been in places where you see Americans come trooping in, you know, wanting their burgers, you know, and just making the people feel really just like killing them?
They try to divide us by color, by religion, by gender, by class, by ethnicity, by language. They cannot rule without dividing us. Because when we are divided, we are very weak. We are fragmented. So the first lesson, and what I gain being here, that we have to undo first the division in Africa. We have to be one, and then the division between Africa and Asia, and the division between Asia, Africa, and Europe, and the United States, and Australia. We are living in one world, not three. I am against the word third world. We are not third world. We are living in one world dominated by the few who own the military, the money, the technology, and the media. And we are all one. And as my friend said that I spoke about Bin Laden and George Bush, yes. Bin Laden and George Bush are twins, you know, they are twins. And in fact, George Bush, the father, usually I say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. We have to use creativity. We have to use literature. We have to use music to resist.
I told you that the implosion of the United States would occur in our lifetime, that hatred would consume itself, bite off its hands, feed on its entrails, feed on its own children, that this would explode into 1 billion body parts like fireworks on the 4th of July. I told you the sun would rise on dead mornings around white picket fence corners, waking Dick and Jane, turning their faces toward the mirror, crystallizing the cries of dead bodies floating down rivers of massacres and mass graves. That the U.S. in Bosnia would take Oklahoma by surprise. That the U.S. in the Middle East, in Africa, would pay New York City a visit. that U.S. policymakers would meet in chandeliered rooms for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner, to toss stacks of paper around like some ball game, white-collar trashmen. I told you that assassins would come back into style, that the Dark Ages would thrive in the 21st century. I told you that McCarthy would miraculously come back from the dead.
It has usually been the journalists, the writers, the poets, the novelists, the artists, who have in many ways been the first to hear the boots and the knock on the door. There are reasons for that I think all of you know much better than I, and certainly the poetry that was read earlier speaks to that, because when you speak truth to power, they come after you first. I think that this is an important gathering at an important time in the world. You've got a responsibility. You have a responsibility to speak truth to power and to own some concepts and words. Security. What does security mean? Are there any walls, any number of border guards? Are there any measures like fingerprinting and searches at airports that can keep any people safe when they are the despised of the world? In a world where there are deep-rooted inequalities and a sense of marginalization and disempowerment worldwide, when it is a country that feels that it is too important, too good, too powerful to play by anybody else's rules, is there any border guard that's going to be able to create security? Human security is about something else.
In spite of everything that's happening, in spite of that, all of these years of suffering, people are resisting. The languages are here and they are still existing, and people are resisting in so many ways, in so many forms, even though it's not always visible. And I see many issues and many problems mostly as opportunities. I see the lack of schools as the opportunity to build alternative education. I see the lack of electricity as the opportunity to create and use alternative source of energies. You know, wherever there is a vacuum, wherever people think, oh, these poor people, they don't have this and that, I say, thank God they didn't bring that yet so that we can do something else. That is the way I feel really about it. And I know we have the power to do that. And in the language era, the people that I trust the most are the women. Most of the time, women that are called illiterate, you know, supposedly don't know this and that, because they carry the children and they breastfeed them, and they can sing lullabies that are songs of freedom.
As you may know, the Mano River Basin is engulfed in a war, civil war, since 15 years. We have lost more than 250,000 people in this war, beginning with Liberia and then with Sierra Leone and Guinea in the southeastern part of Guinea. We have 2/5 of the population under what the UN system called the lowest level of poverty. That means that 2/5 of our population has not $1 a day to live with. We have 70%, between 70 and 80% of illiteracy rate. I am in a region where when you stand up in the morning, you don't know what to eat sometimes, the whole day. At the same time, you have people who are in all kinds of traffic in this region, diamonds. You have arms trafficking, child trafficking, human bodies trafficking. And that is not done by Africans only. They are just at the lowest level of the trafficking. And they have not money for it, enough money for it. So, and now we are talking about oil in this region. So sometimes I'm praying, please God, don't give us oil, because we have enough problem now with gold, diamonds, and guns. If you put oil on that, we are dead. So globalization then is felt as a very big discrimination against us.
But then globalization right now, to many of us who are working in movements and in struggles, has come to mean a different thing in the press. And I refer to this as the new model of globalization, or if I could refer to it as globalization on steroids right now, which is we have an imposed model led by multinational banks, led by military weaponry, led primarily by the United States elite and not by the United States as a country, that imposes its model of globalization economically, culturally, and politically on anyone and everyone in the world, including those of us here in the United States. Now, for me, the most violent form of this model is clearly its economic impact, where we have the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the US military themselves imposing their model on the world, where we have a model that transforms everybody into consumers and producers and makes millions of people discover that they have become superfluous, unnecessary both to production and consumption. There's also the cultural level of economic and political globalization, the cultural level, which to me is revealed in the fact that we have women in Thailand right now getting plastic surgery to change the shape of their eyes, and women in the Arab world straightening their curly, frizzy hair to look more European, and women in Brazil struggling to get larger breasts to look more European, and women in the United States starving themselves into artificial thinness to look like what no one should ever naturally look like. And yet I wonder how much of this is really new. And I personally think that a lot of us who come from, so to speak, underdeveloped nations or come from nations that have been occupied have cultural inferiority, where we think that our images and our products and our ideas somehow are not good enough, and that we always aspire to have the standards of other people who, unfortunately, in most circumstances, happen to be the same people who have oppressed us and created within us this cultural inferiority. And it becomes a continuing cycle.
Our presence in the global public instigates all sorts of reactions, some overtly political and known, others not so clearly defined in their political and ideological content. When we move, we cause ruptures, and we create opportunities for transformation. That is why they keep us under such intense surveillance. And our political agency has been defined as a very key part of what today is glibly called terrorism. We have been the terrorists for as long as we have challenged and resisted white supremacy and all the other forms of patriarchal repression. And I honestly believe, and I know, that we need to revisit the interstices where privilege meets resistance, and ask new questions, new kinds of questions, make different kinds of inquiries, and explore the possibilities of expanding our understandings of globalization and how it is reshaping the meanings of being Black, of race and racial exclusion, gender, and the surveillance over our agencies and visions as women. For me, it remains a crucial political habit to continue making the personal as political as possible, and to always think about what it means to travel and resist in a world that is so blatantly hegemonized and dominated by neoliberal discourses of supposed openness and inclusiveness. Of course it's about me as a Black woman who resists when a white immigration officer leans over and whispers ominously that you're not as smart as you think you are. And then he stamps my passport and allows me into this deeply African-hating place. It is crucial that we remember always that the world is not open to Black women who are radical and struggling for rights and entitlements. It's not open to Black women who demand accountability and respect from states that are deeply implicated in the plunder and violation of our bodies and the spaces where we live. There is no separation between the political, economic, and military interests of the African ruling classes and those classes that have historically dominated and plundered our societies. Both are interpreting globalization as an opportunity to consolidate their class interests through negotiated settlements over deals that include oil, diamonds, rare industrial minerals, ancient and precious timbers and forests, irreplaceable biological diversity, and the perpetuation of systems of labor exploitation that have made development a nightmare for ordinary people.
I am suggesting that facts indicate that there is something systemic about the current assault on the working class, and its tentacles affect the whole of society. In the United States, there has been a drop of $1,035 in income since the year 2000. In other words, we are now making $1,035 less than we were 4 years ago. The country's trade deficit is $1.6 billion per day. And the CEOs of major transnationals are making 500 times what an average worker makes in the United States. This is taking place whether the CEO is headquartered in the global north or the global south. The exploitation and the reach for maximum profit increases daily. For years, capitalism has sought to place the responsibility for the loss of jobs on the excessive demands of the trade unions. For so long, the trade union leadership has attempted to place the blame for the loss of jobs in the North on outsourcing jobs and entire plants to the South, including the southern United States. Of course, the playing field for bargaining is filled with threats of layoffs, plant closings, or moving the business to other countries. Labor is then placed in the position of bargaining from weakness, since the government sides with big business. This results in U.S. workers joining in a race to the bottom as their standard of living steadily decreases. As the struggle continues, we in the global North must join with those who have a strategy to close the gap between the North and the South. It seems to me that this is the way the labor movement here can halt and reverse the onslaught of global capitalism. At the end of the day, even though 150 years have passed, Karl Marx had it right when he said, "Workers of the world unite. A luta continua," or as the farm workers proclaim, "Si se puede," we shall overcome.
Yamagara Ninda Marina. In the language of my ancestors, the Gumaroi people of Australia, I welcome you all here today. Firstly, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of this land, the Native Americans. My people don't go anywhere without acknowledging the ancestors of the land. Globalisation is really nothing new to my people. It's just another word for colonisation. Before the colonisation of my people, there were over 500 different nations in Australia with over 500 distinct languages and 300 different dialects. Our focus, our philosophy on life was to respect the past, which was about our ancestors and those that have gone before us and the knowledge that they gave us. It is also about respecting the present, respecting each other as people and respecting what's around us. And it's also about respecting the future. The future is the environment and our children, to make sure that we have a future. Before 1788, there were over 1 million Aboriginal people living on mainland Australia. Today, there's 300,000. We now constitute 2.5% of the Australian population. The situation in Australia at the moment isn't a very good situation for Aboriginal people. We have the highest unemployment rates, we have the highest incarceration rates, we have the worst health situation in Australia with very high mortality rates, high neonatal deaths. We have diseases that have been caused from sedentary lifestyles like renal, heart, diabetes, and very high drug and alcohol dependency. We have the highest rate of homelessness. Our average age for our men to live is 45 to 50 years old. Women fare a little bit better, 50 to 55 years. This is some 20 to 25 years less than other Australians. Our struggle with the Australian people has been based primarily on land rights and traditional rights. Our rights to practice our own religion, speak our own language, and live within the traditions that we have had for thousands of years. Globalisation, of course, has affected that in many ways. When we were colonised, we were forbidden to speak our languages. We were all given English names. We were rounded up and put onto what they called missions. I sometimes refer to it very similar to the situation that happened in South Africa. In fact, the apartheid system in South Africa was based on the Queensland Aboriginal Protection Act, which was about segregating Aboriginal people. So we've come through after 216 years, we're still trying to maintain that struggle and still coming to terms with the effects of colonisation.
It's so high, you can't go over. It's so low, you can't go under. It's so wide, you can't go around. You must come in at the door. I'm telling you, it's so high, you can't go over. It's so low, you can't go under. It's so wide, you can't go around. You must come in at the door.
We are in a world of contradictions, a world where all the time I have to justify to the others why I am a dark, black woman writer of Africa. Because it seems like a defeat to be in first a black, in second a woman, in third a writer family, and in the end an African. A part of the old African, the forgotten continent without culture, without thinking, without only knows dance and songs, diseases, AIDS in particular, misery, wars, genocide. The forgotten one because this arranges some people. It's the same image Europa gave to Africa 4 centuries ago to explain and justify slavery and colonialism and other forms of dominations. I want that you, I'm talking about people thinking in their superiority, learn my clothing, my literature, my land, like I know your clothing, your music, your literature, your land.
The first thing that I want to do is to replace the word globalization with the word empire building. which would make globalization not a contemporary phenomenon alone, but a violent process with a long history, with political, economic, and psychic costs. And it's the cost side and the psychic side of the equation with which I'm most concerned. Put differently, have we become complicit in a deep forgetting that mimics the enforced divisions and separations that accompanied the first round of empire? Divisions and separations among mind, body, and spirit that presumably could not exist in the same body. Divisions and separations among first world and third world people that continue to play themselves out in divisions between tradition and modernity, the secular and the sacred, the rational and the non-rational, art and politics, the living and the dead, or the political and the spiritual.
I was thinking about reading from my work, something that might somehow have something to do with globalization. My mind skipped and skipped and skipped until it finally hit upon a novel, my third novel, called Mama Day. Because in that novel, those of you who know it, there is a hurricane. And what hurricanes do in their birth and their growth is that they follow the Middle Passage. They start on the shores of Africa as simple breezes. Then when they go over the Atlantic Ocean, they start to pick up speed and pick up spin. They hit the West Indies, then they bounce from the West Indies and they move up to the East Coast or the Southeast Coast of the United States. And when I looked at it, I said, my God, a hurricane takes the Middle Passage. It's actually the Middle Passage in its formation. So I thought I would read a little bit about that, about the coming of this hurricane to this island. And that's what I'm going to share with you now. Somewhere behind the clouds, the sun sets and the quarter moon rises. And folks are doing the things that normally come with the evening. The suppers are cooked and eaten, the babies put to bed. But this night, it's with the static from radios and the blue glow of the television. Hurricane watch. They evacuating beyond the bridge. The Red Cross is putting up shelters. The National Guard is called into Savannah to stop the looting that might come after. Picture after picture of boarded up stores, deserted marinas, and interviews with mayors out talking each other about who's bound to have the worst disaster area and how much emergency aid they've been promised from Washington. Things has always been done different in Willow Springs. First off, it ain't never crossed nobody's mind to leave. Them sitting close to the water just get back a little more, though nobody's been fool enough to build right up to the edge. Ain't been a bad hurricane in most living memories, but that's the last memory to count. It's a place always been hit by storms, leaving a lick and a promise. So houses just don't get built near the water, like fields don't get planted. A promise is as good as your word here, and you learn to live like every rain is gonna be the big one. Second off, there ain't no mayor, governor, or the like. If anything gets blown down, it's understood everybody will get together and put it back up. In 1920, Miranda says they had to redo parts of the bridge. Sure couldn't depend upon South Carolina or Georgia, since they don't collect our taxes. It's like we don't exist for them. And near about midnight, when that hurricane watch becomes a weight, they stop existing for us. Them televisions and radios get turned off so folks can sit in the quiet, a respectful silence for the coming of the force.
You know, being a child in Haiti, and when you're a kid, hurricanes are kind of exciting. you know, nothing like, you know, just you get out of school, nothing like what you know recently happened in Gonaive, for example. But going to the question about the sense of history, I think, you know, especially for us this year, you know, this is the 200-year anniversary of Haitian independence, the bicentennial, and I think it, you know, this whole, everything that's happened this year so far with, you know, with President Aristide and all this, the violence that preceded that, and some of the violence that we're having now, and the hurricane, I think people even, we've had to ask ourselves this question, you know, are we marred, are we scarred by history? So that question, that history is so present for us, so much so that sometimes, you know, when in moments like this, when people are, you know, when there's a fight, or, you know, people will say, you know, they can't do this to us, you know, we are the children of Dessalines, of Toussaint, you know, the leaders of the revolution. So it's like there's this sense that, you know, that history is something that happened yesterday, and in our history we have this circularity of things that we thought we had defeated, we had been through, just keep happening over and over. So there's this feeling that history doesn't go away.
Nothing is forever, right? And that's what, and so, you know, we didn't come here to clutch onto things. And that's why land, for instance, the most visible, the most secure element in anybody's life on this earth is, you know, was not allowed to be held by individuals, because the fundamental idea is that those who are alive now, you know, inherited the land from those who are gone, and they really are just caretakers, you know, of the land for those who are coming.
Abantu, are you asleep yet? No. I'm going to speak now. The next session is speaking against the grain of the rhetoric of globalization, sitting in the wings of the stage of historical action. Millions of people, mostly women and children, remain, hang on to life, suffocating in the heat of the Sahara Desert as they squat in hovels, in sprawling refugee camps across the searing sands of the Sahara. Human lives shriveling and perishing faster than the sand blown by the desert wind. Their homes burning, houses smoldering after the ravaging fires of ethnic cleansing have exhausted their hatred and moved on to wipe out life somewhere else. Darfur is no more.
After a month of wandering through Gulu and Kitgum, this is in the northern part of Uganda, looting and killing, they divided Aboke girls into two groups. I was among the first group to be marched further north a week later, following the flow of the Nile into Sudan. Barefoot, I tried to ease the blisters on my rotting feet by wrapping them in leaves. I was feverish. I felt nauseous, often had diarrhea. I was too weak to walk fast, but even then, even the hardened rebels were not spared. Those who slackened that space were promised death by bayonet so that they can rest forever. After 4 days and nights of the march, starving and arching for water, we reached the main training camp in Sudan, where the Muslim government in Khartoum supports the loss-resistant army with weapons and uniform. The place had the smell of death. Before even going deep, I knew there was a great trouble. But I had given up. I had no hopes of escape. Home was many miles away. I was in a strange land with heartless people ever known. We are to assemble before the leader of the rebel movement, Joseph Kony, at the parade ground. Aboke girls should forget about going back to Uganda, Kony said. They should be trained to fight. A week later, the commanders gave us AK-47 assault rifle and taught us how to dismantle, clean, and assemble them. Hunger will teach you how to shoot, they said. Konyi distributed us to his commanders. I was given to a man older than my father. His eyes were hard-hitting. They sent me to a pool of sweat. Remove your clothes, he screamed. I was too scared to move. How could this man do this to me? I wanted to shout. Who could help me? God help me. He seized me and forced me to bed. I felt like a thorn was in my skin. My innocence was destroyed. They were right. Hunger taught me how to fight. We raided villages looking for food and water. Our commanders, the so-called husbands, provided nothing for us. We were forced to eat lizards, rats, wild fruits, leaves, roots, and soil. We walked about 3 miles from the camp to look for water. We had to dig in the sand with our fingers, then wait for hours for the moisture to surface. Some could not wait. The path to the water place strained with corpses. Sudan was a grave. 7 months after my capture, I was no longer myself. I was a walking skeleton with erotic feet. I escaped death many times. Twice I tried to shoot myself and could have succeeded if a fellow captive had not snatched away the rifle. I fainted from thirst, thought to be a dead corpse, thought to be another corpse. I was buried alive. When I regained my conscience, I dug my way out of the shallow grave. I stood up and walked out across the arid plains. On my way home, I managed to persuade 8 other girls to escape with me. After a long struggle, surviving on leaves and soil, I reached safety on 1997.
Sometimes I feel like a mother's child. I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone.
I will be the Shibin queen. And you will be, when I say this, like you are doing, you did so well. You say, Aisle pants, but when the Aisle pants comes, I want you to make this roof fall down, right? Aisle pants, Alab sembi zengalan shabat. That was the one that makes the money flow when the women have brewed beer, home businesses, grassroots businesses. One of them is brewing, but they do all kinds of things. They weed, sing songs when they are weeding. The baby's on the back. They sing the song to the child. The rhythm of African life is accompanied by the discourses of Africa. And then the point that I'm making in that paper, Africa and the World, and the need to write metaphors of Africa in African languages, is that if we are not capturing the spirit, the essence of work, of life, of spirit, of what's happening on African soil, then we are not connected to what's happening in the African sphere. And this cannot be done by me standing behind the podium. I can only do it when I go there and be part of it, so that it's a part of me. And then, even when I am doing this thing which I do called writing, when I'm writing in English, I have this obligation to bring the metaphors of Africa into the script.
I
know I've been changed. I know I've been changed. I know I've been changed since my sister's done left me. I ain't the same. She made me fearless poets, sounding out syllables before writing them down, pronouncing words not found in Webster. I write revolution 100 times on my soul just to test her. Spinning nappy hair between two fingers, not hip-hop poet, a new soul singer, just true to roots that trace back to freedom.
This question of cultural retention, while it is true that much was retained, because there's been no seepage of that knowledge through the education system, etc., we have not been able to transform it to make it a positive thing. And I don't agree with you that that knowledge is not there. I mean, from C.L.R. James, Black Jacobins, Richard Howard, it is there. But it has not infiltrated the education system, and it has not, we have not been able to galvanize it into giving us power. And unless and until so that it remains amongst the already convinced, our children are still fighting the battles of being called Negro and all of that in our schools. And that whole thing of cultural retention has been unable to galvanize us into, in this era of globalization, in being able to galvanize us into being a powerful global tribe.
Created what I call a plural identity. Plural meaning that it is not only one identity based on one factor, be it color. History has made them to add to it. They survive because they adapted intelligently, creatively. And they adapted without rejecting, integrating, etc. This process of a dynamic creation, whose core value is resisting to oppression, fighting back intelligently, is also, in my view, one of the answers for the globalization of now. And if you take the cultural expression of this hemisphere, you see very quickly that most of the artistic and cultural creation coming from this area very quickly became universal. Not because it was carried by the power of the American communication or artistic sector, but the inner dynamic, exactly. Like rap invented by the young black, poor, oppressed in the suburbs of your big cities, as a way of resisting a system, not only musically, artistically, but even the way they clothe and the way they walk, everything. Firstly, starting with a sexist message and violence, and slowly talking about love, resistance to oppression, global oppression, whatever it comes, and suddenly becoming the artist expression of the young Japanese in Japan, or the Senegalese, or the Mongol, coming from here. It became universal because it had the ingredient of resistance and universality.
There will always be faster, more sophisticated and powerful machines, technology, and artificial intelligence. But what's really important in this or any other time is human intelligence. And it's human intelligence that determines how technology is applied, who has access to the technology, and what is the content of that media in those machines.
What I found as a non-traditional alternative artist, because I do rock or some experimental stuff with strings and no percussion, but deconstructed songs that were written in the rock genre. And being a black woman who is a composer and doing something that's pretty much dominated by white males, rock music, I realized I had to forge my own path. You know, I could either claw and fight for an appointed place in a box, or I could do my own thing. And in deciding to do my own thing, you know, there are a lot of struggles, wearing a lot of hats. Sometimes you feel like you can't
give your art all that you need to give your art because you're consumed with, you know, feeding yourself, doing things right if you're going to start a business. But then I realized, you know what, I can do this. And part of the reason why I made that decision was because of how accessible everything is right now with technology, the web being a big part. E-commerce is something that people are constantly talking about, you know, and basically if we can use it, if it's in the hands of the people, a global marketplace can be a very powerful tool. Can definitely cut out the people who want to hoard the talent for themselves to just make huge dollars in a corporate fashion. And essentially, that's a positive aspect that I find about, you know, the boundaries kind of disappearing, you being able to take your art to the world. And essentially with all things, there just needs to be balance.
There's an ancient story of muti, tokoloshis, and myths and spirits who'll climb into your dreams, creating fear in times of bliss. But I hold a pen for every witch and bitch with black magic in her genes, who seeks to love beyond these silences and claim back the sanctity of her dreams, because if I, as the past, will be the pain of my children, if I, as the present, will be the shame of my children, if I, as the future, will call their lives a sin, I speak of things that words can kill you for.
My name is Mireille Pamberi. I'm a journalist from Martinique. I was born in Central Africa, the human cradle. That's where all human beings come from. We always forget that because, you know, when we speak of Africa, we tend to speak of Africa in a very negative and sad way, whereas everybody comes from Africa, everything started in Africa. What are the, would I say the rest or what is remain of African spirituality in Nigeria? Because across the ocean, in Brazil, in Cuba, in Haiti, of course, in Louisiana, you still have strong African spirituality. So this is my question.
The mention of even the word juju that we had rejected, that there is a tendency of the new elite, that's what I was talking about. You know, using Western categories, colonialist mentality, to come and critique that which is yourself, which is rooted in your ancestry, in our own. Over this thing we heard about this juju or whatever, you see how elites are using exactly the language of colonial imperialists to abuse their own tradition and culture, without acknowledging that this is a distortion of the religion. In fact, they don't know it anymore. Okay, if you have 419, scam, or you have abuse of power, you have rituals to also protect that power. Because we are human, we all have this thing called conscience.
We do not make ourselves or name ourselves anymore. We just simply turn into consumers of Western culture and want to exhibit that as the norm. I'm wondering how we as academics, as writers, and then people who have also seen the way that our own youths and young people are consuming the pop culture and using the West as its own media, as its own model for defining and shaping their own identity. How best we can continue to inform and transform our own authentic indigenous values as one that they can abide by and use as paradigms, as models for their own life and defining themselves. How can we rebuild that confidence?
What put us together is our internal values, and globalization can do nothing against it.
The woman message has been about humanism, has been about how to get rid of poverty, how to get rid of violence, and men are the perpetrators of violence in many of these places. So the women are talking about environment, they are talking about clean water, they're talking about poverty, and they're teaching us, they're humanizing us in a way.
But it's also a global climate in literature, and our stories and our words are colliding and connecting, and we're coming in closer contact with one another.
And black women writers have often been marginalized and trivialized, and we even actually do it to ourselves. So being able to come together to talk about how our writing can affect the world and can affect the future is very important.
As a Caribbean person growing up in the Caribbean, I just in my family alone, we had African people, white people, Indian people, Chinese people, native people, Jewish people, what we call Syrians, which are actually Arab people. And the culture in the classroom, when I was in class, it was that diverse. I mean, most people were mixed like me, and that meant that you brought with you a wealth of culture. So I grew up with a perspective that was very global.
If anybody in the world would understand globalization, it wouldn't be Americans. Everybody says that we're doing it, and on this panel they're saying it, and I think it's true, but we have no comprehension of it. In my idea, it's kind of like we were Robinson Crusoe. All of us, and we crashed on this island, and there was no Friday there, and we've been there for 300 years. And our language has deteriorated until it's just a bunch of sounds that attach to things. Raw, and you just make these noises and sounds. And then when people come, when globalization really starts to happen, other people come around from other languages and cultures. We're afraid of them. We scream at them. We laugh at them. We call them barbarians, as any people who become, completely, insular do. We throw our feces at them. This is what Americans do. When I say we, this is what Americans do. Any attempt that Americans make at enforcing globalization is invalid and needs to be stopped. Any attempt that we make, because we don't know what we're talking about. Americans don't know anything about the rest of the world. We don't speak other languages. We don't care about other people. We don't know what it is to cross borders as a regular thing. We call crossing the border go from New York to New Jersey. We do that in a tunnel.
We should look at another term often used to illustrate the damages of multicultural expansion, globalization. I use this term loosely to examine what I do within sound text, more importantly, what I have chosen to explore through a literary form called macaronic. Macaronic verse, a form developed in the 15th century Italy and later popularized in Germany, was constructed in 4 simple ways. 1, the writer used 2 or more languages with one language used for conjunctions. 2nd, the language was not restricted to pure dialect but open to the language of law, newspapers, the vernacular, etc. 3rdly, words may contain an ending of another language. For example, if I combine Japanese and Spanish, words would sound like kohia, wakarimasamos, tokeska. Lastly, the form was often used as satire, as a means of critiquing the political atmosphere for that time, with no line limitations, no meter involved, just wordplay. Now I'm going to read an early example of one of my macaronic verses, Histology. Gyoro nan transmitter di cielo, 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 cielo. Blessed visa the imagine captured Hoshano of Hikari. Dotte kina kinescope globalizing sounds unit modulation. Fallacious shizokeza. Fukyo no miyasaku, fukyo no miyasaku, fukyo no miyasaku. I not to absorb my luz contrasting en medio realtime y Buffy la manta de vampiro. Azucarado reflection of stale technologia, subterráneo realism, my Gabriel blowhorn zip propaganda. Yo, doña está cool. Media, grocery bag stuff for a life's marketing indulgences. Lloré su para ti, mi amplify padre, mi prime time orgasán. Watash kushi no close caption Espíritu Santo. By broadcast, you are my Sagrada Comunión, you are my Antichrist.
And so tonight, Marsha Gillespie, Yari Yari celebrates you for all that you have done in the field of communications and so much more, for your principled leadership, for your visionary way, for your passion for justice, with the Contemporary Mass Media Award and a special little gift from the Essence family, and we're here tonight. It's bound copies of all of your powerful Essence editorials. So come, Marsha, and let us present you with your award.
Well, I'm just a puddle. You know, what can I say? To be honored by your sisters is the most powerful thing in the world. To have one of your best friends, your best sister friend, say all these wonderful things for you, feel like I've died and gone to heaven.
It is my pleasure and honor to present the Yari Yari Pamberi New Voice in Literature Award to Tananarive Due.
And Angola has paid a tremendous price for its valiant fight against the colonial powers of Portugal. And while we say that, we also have to pay homage to the valiant people of Cuba who came to Angola's aid. And together with the valiant people of Angola and the sons and daughters returned from Cuba, they held the line in Angola at a price that we still don't know. So on behalf of OA, I would like to extend this award to OMA with all our gratitude and with all our thanks for the great work that you do.
Robert Christman, for your dedication and hard work in maintaining the Black Scholar Journal as a valuable resource for all of us. You deserve more accolades than this solitary award, but this is all we have to give you.
I am truly honored to present Mr. Moses, Dr. Moses, with the outstanding Yari Yari Award in Education. And accepting on his behalf, I believe, is Dr. Janet Moses, who herself is a distinguished pediatrician, and we welcome her to the podium.
It gives me great pleasure to present this award for long-term commitment to women's issues to Dr. Andre Nicola McLaughlin.
We have benefited from you, Barbara, and we are still going to benefit from you as the ambassador from South Africa to the United States. And it is my great pleasure and with love and respect that I present this award to you for human rights and literature.
I don't know what to say, and I'm not going to say very much, but what I would like to say to Jane is that I would like her to invite me to Yari Yari Pamberi next year so that I can give a lecture.
Yari Yari Pamberi presents the Haitian people in recognition of the revolution and in solidarity with the continuing struggle for justice and democracy. We present this to Haiti, and what we think is that we will leave this award with Patricia Blanchette, a wonderful photographer and a daughter of Haiti.
Viva Haiti!